Hey everyone, welcome back to Widget Wisdom. In today's video, we are diving into the MVC architecture in Flutter. MVC, which stands for Model View Controller, is one of the most commonly used software design pattern for developing scalable and maintainable apps. Today we will learn how to implement MVC in Flutter and why it's important for separating concerns in your app development. So let's start by discussing the basics of MVC and why it's still relevant. Before we diving into the code, let's understand the core concepts of MVC. As I mentioned, MVC stands for Model View Controller, and the model handles the business logic and data. For example, think of the model as the brain of a game. It's like a scoreboard keeping track of how many coins you have collected and the rules of the game. The model knows the current score, where the character is, and the rules like you have got 10 points for each coin, or if you hit the sideways then you are out. Next, we have the view, which is responsible for the UI and displaying data to the user. The view is what you see on the screen, like the game displays. It's the character running the coins and the score at the top of the screen. The view shows you what is happening in the game but doesn't know how the game works. It just displays whatever the model tells it to. Finally, there is the controller, which acts as a bridge between the model and the view, receiving user input, updating the model, and reflecting changes in the view. The controller is like the manager making things happen. It listens to your actions, like pressing a button to jump, and tells the model what to do. For example, when you press a key to collect a coin, the controller tells the model, hey, the player collected a coin, add 10 points to the score. Then the controller tells the view to update the score display. MVC provides an excellent way to organize your code base, making it more modular and maintainable. Now let's jump into Flutter and set up a basic project with MVC. Here I have already created a Flutter project called Flutter MVC example. Once you have opened your Flutter project, let's organize the project's folder structure for MVC. As you know, MVC consists of three things: models, views, and controllers. So let's create three different folders inside the lib directory: a controller folder, a models folder, and then finally a views folder. In this folder, we will place the relevant files for each layer. This separation makes it easier to maintain the code as your app grows. Now let's start with the model. So the model in MVC is responsible for managing data and business logic. In our example, we will create a to-do class to represent a to-do item. Create a new Dart file named todo.dart, then create a class named to-do. Inside this class, we will store two properties: title for the to-do title and is completed for the to-do's status, whether it's completed or not. So we will use a boolean value for is completed, where true indicates completion and false indicate it's still pending. Now let's create a constructor for this class with title as a required parameter and is completed as optional, defaulting to false. So I have defaulted it's false because users don't create to-dos with a completed status from the start. So that's the reason whenever every to-do is added inside our list, the default value is going to be false. Next, add a method named toggle completed. This method toggles the to-do's completion status. If the to-do is completed, it will mark it as uncompleted and vice versa. We will use the is completed property and the not operator to toggle its value. If is completed is true, it will become false, and if false, it will become true. Now let's create the view for this app. Create a new Dart file in the views folder named to-do list view. Inside this file, create a stateless widget called to-do list view. So this widget is going to take two parameters: a list of to-dos and on to-do tab. So on to-do tab is a function to handle when a user taps on a to-do item. Make sure to mark these fields as required in the constructor. Inside the build method, return a list view.builder widget with a item count set to to-do's length. Then for the item builder function, return a list style widget with the title property set to a text widget. So this text widget will display the to-do title. For the trailing icon, use a icon button to show the completion status of the to-do, a check icon if completed, and an empty checkbox if uncompleted. When the user taps the button, the to-do method is called, passing the index of the tapped to-do. Next, let's create the controller. So create a new Dart file in the controller folders and name it as to-do controller.dart. And then inside this file, create a class named to-do controller. And in this class, create a list of to-do item named to-dos. Then create a method add to do. So this add to do method adds a new to do item to the list. So now in this add to do method, simply append a new to do instance with the provided title to the to do list. Now create another method as toggle to do completed, which takes an index as a parameter and toggles the corresponding to do's completion status by calling the toggle completed method. Finally, add a remove to do method that removes a to do from the list by index. Now let's connect the view and controller in the main.dart file. So come to the main.dart file and remove this my home page and my app widgets. And instead of these, create a new stateful widget as my app. Now come inside this widget and here create a to do controller instance named controller. And then create a text editing controller. Then now here add to do, which checks if the text field is not empty, then calls set state to add a new to do using controller.addToDo method. Also create a method toggle to do completed to toggle the completion status when a to do is tabbed. Now come inside the build method and from here return a material app widget. Then set the home property to a scaffold with an app bar and a column in the body. So the column should contain a padding widget with a text field for input and an icon button for adding a new to-dos. The body should also contain an expanded widget with a to-do list view, passing the to-dos list and the toggle to-do completed method. Now let's run the app and see if it works as expected. First, add a new to-do and press the add button. The to-do is added successfully, but the text field isn't cleared. To fix this, we need to add text editing controller.clear after adding the to-do. Okay, now run the app again and let's confirm that the text field clears properly. So now I have added one more task. Now tap onto this icon button and now you can see after adding the task to the list, the text field is cleared. Now let's tap on this checkbox icon to change the to-do status and it works as expected. So this is how we can create a simple to-do app using the MVC architecture in Flutter. Now let's see how we can call an API using the MVC pattern. So here we are going to add a JSON placeholder API to fetch some data and display it in the app. So let's start by adding a new file in the models folder called userModel.dart. Then create a class userModel inside the file with two properties, name and email, both of type string. We will use these properties to store the data fetched from the API. Then create a constructor for the class, making both properties as required. Then create a factory method from JSON that takes a map as an argument and returns a user model object. Then inside this method, return a new user model object and pass the name and email from the map. Next, create a static method as fetch user data that returns a future of user model. Then inside this method, make a get request to the API. First, create a variable response and for making the API call, add the HTTP package. So go to the pubspec.yaml file and here add the HTTP package inside this dependencies section. Then tap on this pubget option to get all the dependencies. Then let's return to userModel.dart and import the package as HTTP. So in the fetch user data method, make a get request by calling the get method on the HTTP class and passing the API URL. So here if the response status code is 200, so in that case, parse the JSON data using JSON decode, passing the response body and return a user model object calling from JSON. And if the status code is not 200, then throw an exception. Now create the controller by adding a file in the controllers folder called user controller dot, and then inside this create a user controller class, and in this class define a method called fetch user data that returns a feature of user model. This method will call the fetch user data from the user model class. Now that the controller is ready, create the view by adding a new file inside the views folder called userview.dart, and then inside this file create a stateful widget called userView. Then create a late variable as future user of type future of user model to hold the future data from the API. Now inside the init state method, call the controller's fetch user data and assign the result to future user. Then inside the build method, return a scaffold widget with an app bar titled as user info. Then set the body property to a center widget with a future builder of user model. Then set its future to future user, and in the builder method handle various states. So return a circular progress indicator if snapshot connection state is waiting, then display a error message if snapshot has error, or return a user data if data is available. And if there is no data, display no data found. Finally, let's call this UI from the main.dart file. So come inside the main.dart file and comment out this my app, and then create a new stateless widget as my app. Then come inside this build method, and from here return a material app with the scaffold, and then set its body to the user view. Now let's test this app. So save all the files and run the app, and now you can see the user data displayed on the screen. So this is how you can use the MVC pattern in your Flutter app to manage code more efficiently. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Widget Wisdom for more such content. I'll see you in the next video.